I should probably get around to this already, shouldn't I? Well, it is almost 3 weeks out from age group nationals, and I'm finally getting around to making the age group nationals video. This one has just been very difficult for me to process. I went into this race with really high expectations for myself. For a couple years now, I've been chasing sub 2 hours. I went into nationals thinking, this is going to be my chance to finally prove to myself that I can break 2 hours in an Olympic distance race, and I didn't. Fortunately for me, it wasn't all bad, and it actually started out on the right foot to a pretty huge degree. I talked back during the Huntington race about how lackluster my swim was that day, and here at Nationals, that kind of turned around completely. That was vindicating for me. It was a good swim overall too. It was very competitive. There were a lot of people that I could race against who I felt really pushed me, but also that I was able to work with, and it felt like a race again. Over the past few weeks, I've kind of been telling myself that my bike leg was good but not great, but really looking back on it, it's better than I'm giving myself credit for, I think. My power wasn't quite on par with what I had done at Huntington. I was focused solely on the bike leg, and here I was actually trying to put together a whole entire race. But anyone who has raced in Milwaukee will tell you that it's an incredibly fast bike course, and that definitely turned out to be true. And despite having lower watts than I had at Huntington, I was overall about 40 to 45 seconds faster. All the work that my coach and I have put into the bike leg over the past year or so has really started to pay off. This is kind of a transition point for me, I guess, where I'm not just stuck in this niche of being a specialist at any one leg, but I'm really having to start to think of myself as more of an all-around triathlete. And that's a good feeling. And then the run, and everything kind of fell apart. I got one really good mile right out of transition where I think I was 5:45, and then after that I really broke down. In previous races for 10Ks I've been trying to hit around 36, and this time I was barely even below 39. I think this was the closest I have ever come to just stopping on the side of the road and giving in. I did manage to pull myself over the finish line and hold pace best I could, but at the end of the race I just didn't have it in me, and I ended up finishing with a time of 2 hours and 50 seconds. At the end of it, I was less than a minute away from what my goal was. Anyone who was there on Saturday will tell you that it was incredibly hot that day, and while that run is very flat and very fast, there's also no shade at all and nowhere to hide from the heat. It affected everyone out on the race course, especially the people who were starting later in the day. So while this was a pretty poor performance for me individually, competitively it went great. Last time I did nationals in 2019, I was, I think, mid-40s. This time I made top 20 overall, and I really can't be mad about that. I mean, heck, I even took home some hardware for 7th in my age group. But while I can't change the weather, I can change my own preparation. And this was probably the biggest eye-opener I've had all season, that I am not heat acclimated at all. My time was probably 20 to 30 seconds per mile slower than I would have liked to be. And I think towards those last few miles, it was really starting to break me down mentally as well. I got to the finish line just barely on my feet. Pretty much as soon as I crossed, I just had to go to the side of the finish chute and hold onto the rails. I was dizzy. I had to wait for my vision to come back into focus. I could barely see straight. On the one hand, it's been, I guess, kind of encouraging to know that this was a physical issue and not a mental issue. I put a lot of pressure on myself to be hard enough, to be tough enough mentally. And after a poor performance at a race, you always have those thoughts of oh, well, I should have just worked harder. I should have just pushed myself a little bit harder, and I could have made up those 50 seconds. And I would have been able to make it if I just stayed focused and kept my head in the game and just run faster. But looking back on it, no, I really couldn't have. I gave everything I was physically capable of giving. I pushed myself as much as my body would let my mind push me. I was where I needed to be mentally and emotionally and psychologically. So I at least have to be proud of myself for pushing through as much as I could mentally. But the other side of the coin, though, is that if this is a physical issue, which it absolutely is, then it's one that I need to start working on now. Lack of heat acclimation isn't just a weakness for me, it's a vulnerability. If this was a race that I barely got through, then breaking 2 hours during age group worlds, my last chance to do it, isn't even going to be in the picture. And I'm grateful, at least, that I got this wake-up call when I did. Because if I went to Abu Dhabi right now, in my current level of fitness, it wouldn't even be safe for me. At least some of my lack of preparation in the short term was just me not being smart. We had a really big turnout, and as one of the exec board members for Full Send, I kind of took it upon myself to be there as much as I could for everyone else. I was out on the race course for most of Thursday afternoon and almost all of Friday, and yet, if I could go back and do it differently, I don't think I would. And while it wasn't the best race day for me, it was an absolutely amazing race day for Full Send as a whole. We had over 24 people out on the race course throughout that entire weekend. We had people racing every day of the weekend. There were so many different PRs, so many different people on the podium, and I could not be prouder of this entire team. You know, even if I didn't have the performance that I wanted to have myself, just being able to get out there on Sunday and cheer for so many people that I knew was the pick-me-up that I needed. And man, some of the athletes on this team are incredibly impressive. Overall, age group nationals was just such an uplifting experience for me. It made triathlon feel like a team sport again. There's so much more I took away from it, both in terms of connection and engagement and valuable lessons. Even if it wasn't the experience that I wanted, looking back on it, I think it was probably the one that I needed. And I'm grateful that it went the way it went.